Yeah, man, it's Good
It
Monday.
is a good Monday. The sun is shining.
And you know what? Based on yesterday, I'm sitting here with a friend.
It's
And I
true.
got another friend behind the camera.
That's true.
And
That's true.
it's all good,
And
man.
we're all friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go.
That's right.
Because relationships are awesome.
It's really true, man.
Yeah,
Really
no,
true.
it was a good start to that relationship series. I'm looking forward to going through it some and
Yeah.
because you're right, and the way you started yesterday out points to this. Like, we're created for relationships because we are made in the image of God, and God, in a mysterious way that we can't fully wrap our minds around, is in constant perfect community within himself.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a good way to say it.
Thank you. It's
Constant
complicated.
community within himself. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, yet one God.
Yeah.
And it just points to the fact that relationships are that important.
Yeah.
So when we understand that relationships are that critical and we are made in his image and we are designed for relationship, I wonder how many things we can come up with to say, well, why does that matter?
Yeah.
A lot.
It'd be a long list.
It'd be a long list
Yeah.
because it matters, because our well-being, our greatest moments in life would be relational moments. Our
Right.
worst moments in life will be relational moments. And
Yeah.
it's just so integral to who we are. And if we didn't have the capacity for relationships, could we actually relate to God?
Right.
Could Jesus come down and, you know what I mean, and actually have this whole relationship with us? And then we realize that he was God.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's so critical.
It's interesting how you said that, because you're right. I think when I think back on all of, like, the greatest moments of my life and all of the hardest moments of my life, I can tell you exactly who was around me at all of those moments.
Yeah,
right?
man.
Like,
Yeah.
the people that I shared those good and bad moments with are very clear in my mind, because it is, I think, a lot of times the way that we feel inside of our relationships that causes great emotion for us.
Yeah.
And that's true with our relationship with God as well. But I thought that was what made what Peggy said so real about
She was
100%
great.
of the
Oh
people
my
that come
gosh.
into her office
Yeah.
are
because
struggling
you-
in relationship.
You can't disassociate the
No.
relationship with the problem, with the issues,
Yeah.
with everything. And it's always going to either affect or be caused by
Right.
a relationship.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part, man. You know? I mean,
is.
there's the good and the bad. And I think that we can look at it that way.
Mm-hmm.
We are shaped by our relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah. That's very true.
from the minute we're born to the minute we die.
Yeah.
We're shaped by our relationships,
Yeah.
good and bad. And so that's how central relationships are to how we're created
Yeah.
and the need for.
But I think another thing that's interesting, that we were kind of laughing about this a moment ago, but when you think about technology, one of the biggest complaints that people have about the social media movement is that it's kind of disconnected us from real relationships.
Yeah, yeah.
But you were saying how it also kind of points to how much we were wired for relationships,
Uh-huh.
that the people who, I mean, this is gonna hit a stereotype. So if this is you, I'm very sorry. I love you as a person, but you got people that sit in, like, the dark room coding, right? We
Yeah.
all have that
Yeah.
visual of somebody sitting behind a computer, like, coding. And those people, a lot of times, are using those codes to create relational spaces on the internet. I feel like,
Yeah,
even the
what
people that
drove
are
them to
sitting
that?
by themselves,
Yeah.
right? Like, why?
Because
why
it's
is
like,
that happening?
no, we got to connect. We have to connect. We have to connect.
Mhm.
And that word connection is a great word for relationship.
Yeah.
And it in some ways has blurred the lines
Yeah.
of, like, what is a good relationship? What is an authentic relationship? But the fact of the matter, it is a connection. So in some way, there's a relational aspect even to all the different social media platforms.
Right.
And people have used it for that.
Yeah.
There's some good that can come from that. And there's some bad that can come from that. And
Yeah.
so you can't throw that away and just say, all those relational spaces out there is like, it's all bad. No.
It's
It's a tool.
Yeah, it is a tool.
And yet we know that there is nothing, because this is just the way we were created. Nothing can take the place of this face-to-face, hey man,
Right.
we're doing life together. You
Right.
know what I mean? Nothing can take the place of that.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's something too about like being close to somebody or being able to put your hand on somebody's
Yeah,
shoulder.
yeah.
You know, like there's something about the physical space that is vitally important. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that God made that very clear when he came and took on flesh and lived
That
among
is
us.
so true.
Right? Like
That-
he came right in, he was like, all right,
I gotta
not
be
getting
there.
it. I'm going in.
I
You
gotta
know?
be there.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what we said about being in the image of God, that he
Yeah.
so desired to have that kind of relationship with us, that's what he
Mhm.
wanted to do.
Yep.
And I love that. I think that just speaks to his love for us, his
Yeah.
desire for us to relate. And yeah, man, I think
Yeah.
that's important. I think
so too.
I like to think through what's the practicality of any kind of theology.
Hmm.
I mean, all of theology is not just about knowledge, but
Right.
it's an outworking of knowledge. We have to have the knowledge, but then we do. And so when we talk about the image of God and we talk about him creating us to be relational beings,
Right.
I think the takeaway, if you just lay all of it out, is then lean into your relational life.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The relationships you have with each other. How can you better love one another? How can
Yep.
you push yourself to say, I'm going to go and minister to that person. I'm going to go serve.
Yeah.
How can you open yourself up when somebody says, how you really doing?
Right.
And instead of saying, man, I'm good, man. It's busy, but I'm good.
Yeah.
And then we roll away and just say, escape
Yep.
that one. It's like, you know what? Here's a couple things you can pray for. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, lean in, just go ahead. It's like, there's a give and take to it. There's a nice thing about somebody being available for you so
Yeah.
they can minister to you.
It's
There's
true.
a beautiful thing. That feels great. And then that
Yep.
person will walk away and saying, God, thank you. You used me to help somebody that needed a word of encouragement. I didn't know
Yeah.
that you needed a word of encouragement or something like that.
Right.
And we feel good about that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's a legitimate thing.
Yeah. I think the other thing important is, and what you're talking about is the angle of having empathy in
Yeah.
our relationships, right? And being able to feel with each other what people are going through. And there's two sides of that. It's one, be available to feel somebody else's, right? But then it's also have the vulnerability to make yourself available to be felt with,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like that one is probably harder. Like I'm all in, like, let me go into your stuff. I'm very happy to enter into somebody else's world.
Exactly.
I will sit down, we'll talk for an hour.
Right.
Tell me all about
right,
yourself.
Right.
I'm so bad at letting other people understand the depths of what's going on inside of me.
Yeah.
Because that feels dangerous.
Oh yeah.
Right?
That's the vulnerability. you
But
know.
who am I to ask somebody else to let me into that space in
So
their
true.
life if I'm not willing to let them into that space in
Yeah,
mine?
that's so true. And that's that give and take of the relationship that is a dynamic that God intended.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah.
It's really funny. Somebody came up to me after service, and I was like, "Oh, I had to think about this one because you get some off the wall things after service, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're like, let me tell you how I feel like, relationships are so critical. He said, even the worst person ever in the prison system, when something goes bad, what do? They put them in solitary confinement
Yeah.
because that's the worst thing possible.
Yep.
And I mean, I think they put them in solitary confinement so they don't harm somebody else.
I think that's part of it.
But they leave them in there for a long time,
Yeah.
which may be part of, like, you got to get your head, whatever. And I've heard people come out of solitary confinement, even though they know they're going back to prison, are so thankful that they went
not be
back
alone.
into that cell with 3 other people,
Yeah.
because there's just people around. You know
Right.
what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
funny. It's funny.
I think that, so we have Fridays off working at church, right? And I'm an introvert by nature. I like to have my alone time. But I've realized about myself that if I stay home by myself all day on Friday, still works on Friday, so it would just be me and Charlie now. But I've learned very quickly that I have to leave the house, because if I don't leave the house and I don't see anybody all day, my mental state is not good. is
Yeah.
important.
Just like, hey, we're all
even
here.
if I
man.
don't
It's
really
like,
talk to anybody, I go to the coffee shop.
you just
I
still
wanna
have people
see
around
other
you.
people
Yeah,
around.
man. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
it's
I get
important.
it. It's so funny how important it really
Yeah.
is.
It's true.
So, I think that when I say lean into it and really see what God has for that.
Yeah.
And also lean into the relationships we've had in the past that have made us the people we are.
Yep.
Hopefully most of that's good, but there
Yeah.
are some bad relationships that have done something to us
Yeah.
that once you uncover and you're like, yeah, that wasn't so good. And that went to a very deep place and it's
Yeah.
kind of affecting the way I'm thinking.
Yep.
That can get worked out, man. That
Yeah.
can get worked out. I know the grace of God comes in
Mm-hmm.
and there's also relationships that we have damaged.
Yeah.
Things we have said, things we have done, or things we're holding back from somebody. And
Right.
and it's really important to realize how critical it is for us to realize how relational we are and how much
Yeah.
of an impact that has on us and others.
Yeah.
You know?
It is really interesting to think about the fact that our relationships with others can impact our relationships with somebody else. Like the
Yeah.
relationships that I had in my family growing up affect the way that my relationships work now.
Yep.
And it's just scientific, it's not happening consciously, but they form us.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Yeah.
why, my parents were very on top of us growing up. Like, who are you spending time with? They wanted to know who we were spending
That's
time
true.
with. They wanted
That's
to make
right.
sure that
That's
it was
true.
people that were going to help push us in the right direction
Yeah.
towards life-giving things. And that is important. I think that's a biblical concept too, to kind of evaluate your relationships, and don't leave relationships with people just because you're a bad person. Like, that's not what we're saying, but be aware of your relationships and how they're
And
impacting you.
exactly. And that may cause you to have to form boundaries.
Yep.
And that's a when I say it's a new concept, it's not new. But over the past 25 years, the boundary idea has become a big thing that people talk about. And it's only because people realize how important and how influential relationships are that sometimes if they're toxic, you got to set some boundaries because it's going to affect you.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
But at the same time, when Jesus says, hey, love one another deeply, Peter said it, and I think 1 Peter 4:8, love each other deeply.
Yeah.
And then it says, because it covers over a multitude of sins.
Yep.
And it's like, man, you can take the good that overtakes the bad, and you can get things worked out, and you can, which is what we're talking about next week.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's like the conflict. That's why conflict is so hard, because relationships affect us so deeply, and we don't want to enter into conflict. Sometimes it hits us, and we got to deal with it.
And I know none of us at all are experiencing any conflict in our lives right now, because there's definitely nothing controversial going on in the world around us, for sure. So
yeah, man. So it comes at the right time.
That'll be really helpful.
These 3 weeks, we're hoping to be very, very practical.
Yeah.
So this week was more, hey man, just open yourself up to relationships.
Yeah.
And realize how big and how important they are.
Yeah.
Lean into that. It's how you were created.
Yeah.
And if there's an issue, if there's something, if there's go talk to somebody, get some help.
Yeah.
If there's somebody that that is like, I should reach out to them, then reach out to them,
Yep.
And then when we talk about conflict, the 1 week, then the second week, then after this one, obviously, is about being so grateful for the people around us. And it's something I don't often think about right away.
Yeah.
That's not my first thought, but I should.
Yeah.
Like, I should be
Well,
saying that to myself,
I think there's a lot of times that we fall into the trap of looking at the people around us and wondering, how can they help me? Like, what can this person do for me? What can this relationship do to build my life up in some way? And if that is how we're approaching relationships, A, we totally miss the gratitude piece, right?
Yeah.
And then B, we are approaching it in the opposite way that God told us to.
That's right. Jesus is always like, first shall be last, last shall be first. And it's like, yeah, man, approach it. how can I be of service to you?
Yeah.
That's the Good Samaritan right away,
Oh, yeah.
man. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So,
Yep.
yeah, there's a lot to it, man.
Yeah, but
big
this
deal.
first
It's a
week-
big deal.
Was a lot of why relationship, like why do we have them, why do we need to have them.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna quote our friend Marv, because God said so.
That's
know?
right. That's right,
He
man.
just says, because God said
God
so.
said so.
But
And
you go
that's,
back to
all
that
we need.
greatest commandment of, love the Lord your God
Yeah.
with all your heart, soul, mind, strength,
Yep.
and love each other as yourself, love one another as yourself.
that's
And
all relational.
Yeah.
You know?
that's all we need.
Yeah, man.
Easy
All right.
as that,
Thanks, friend.
for sure.